not very similar in terms of their effects on a human life. And while there are many wacky and unsupportable dogmas within every religion, within Buddhism, they're different, and there's a spirit of empirical rigor that the Dalai Lama has, for instance. I mean, he's gone on record over and over again saying if science demonstrates something that some doctrine of Buddhism is false, then science wins. I mean, he has that to some degree that's a blank check, because some of the doctrines to which most Buddhists are attached are doctrines that science is not likely to weigh in on anytime soon. But there is a difference, and while I criticize Buddhism in a very long endnote in my book, it is distinct from Islam, and as Islam is distinct from almost every other religion at this moment.
Here is a great question from the audience. While we as adults agree with you totally, how do we begin to reach our young children or grandchildren? How do we teach our young children or grandchildren about life in this respect, when those under the age of 7, the age of reason, will not understand these ideas in the midst of this society?
Well, I think kids, unless they're conditioned otherwise, don't come into this world believing themselves to be Christians or Muslims or Jews. I mean, we give them these ideas. They don't just pluck them out of the ether. And so it seems to me that simply giving honest answers to their questions, and certainly lifting this taboo of saying, I don't know. I mean, we're so reluctant to say, I don't know. And incidentally, scientists are the people who are really good at saying, I don't know. They say, I don't know all the time, because they're terrified that some specialist is going to be in the room who knows so much more about what they've been asked that, you can almost never get a scientist to weigh in on anything but his most narrow area of specialization. And this is slightly off topic, but notice the fact that science is paying a price for this, in that fundamentalists are really good at using the candor of science against it. I mean, whenever scientists say, I don't know, on Larry King Live, therein rush 1,000 fundamentalists, giving us the God of the gaps there. And that's really what intelligent design is. It is politics and religion masquerading as science.
Do you think the right wing actually believes in religion, or does it simply use religion to mobilize the masses to support the fight for finite natural resources like oil?
Well, that is spoken like a true religious moderate. Yeah, incidentally, needless to say, I believe that many people, most of the time, really believe what they say they believe. And their allocations of time and energy attest to this. Certainly a willingness to blow yourself up attests to this. But the people who are standing out on the sidewalks with the placards protesting homosexuality, I believe they really think homosexuality has been proscribed by God. And incidentally, that is why the First Amendment to the Constitution is not good enough to keep religion out of politics. It is only rational to be motivated by what you think is true. If you really think there is a God who hates homosexuals, it would be totally irrational to live in a society that happily live in a society that just tolerates homosexuality. So I actually do believe people believe these rather unbelievable things.
What percentage of your reader feedback has been hostile, and how hostile?
That's actually been a pleasant surprise. I would say at this point something like 99% is really quite positive and quite supportive, and then there are the crazy emails, but nothing terribly scary either, so that's been good.
What in your mind is the proper relationship between atheism and libertarianism?
Actually, it's an interesting question. I've never thought about that, but there's a link in the sense that really the core idea of libertarianism is that peaceful, honest people have the right to be left alone. And this is trespassed rather obviously by the religious right in their impulse to legislate what goes on in the bedroom and in other aspects of our privacy. So libertarians are very much, while they are conservative in ways that don't satisfy many liberals, they are fundamentally against this idea that you can intrude upon your neighbor's pursuit of happiness because you don't like his behavior. If his behavior doesn't affect you, if it doesn't affect your property, then consenting adults should be able to do whatever they want. And it seems to me a very sensible way of looking at it.
If neuroscience ultimately shows, if it hasn't already, that religious zealotry has a chemical or genetic component, then what solutions do you have to the whole question of world or religious peace? Asterisk. Note that half of all scientists are religious may be the direct measure of this genetic component.
Yeah, well, it all has a genetic and chemical component. I mean, every aspect of our experience. And the nature-nurture divide has been somewhat oversold. Again, I would point to Western Europe. There is a level of unbelief in Western Europe, in a country like Sweden, for instance, that is just the polar opposite of our situation. Here we have something like 3 or 5% of Americans who will call themselves atheists, and maybe 10% who are just fundamentally unsure. We have 90%, basically. 83% of Americans believe that Jesus literally rose from the dead. Something like 80%, depending on how the question is asked, 60 to 80% of Swedes are atheists. So unless you're going to allege some real genetic difference between Swedes and Americans, it doesn't seem like a genetic problem. It really, to my mind, is a conversational problem.
This is related. Why is the United States going backward in terms of its attachment to religion, while the rest of the educated world, Western Europe and Asia, is going forward? In other words, what accounts for the extraordinary persistence of fundamentalism in America compared to the rest of the developed world?
Yeah, it is a persistence. I don't think it's that we're necessarily going backwards. It's certainly become more visible, and it has become politically more empowered. But the levels of fundamentalism, if you look at just the Gallup polls over the last 70-some-odd years, the numbers of people who believe that Satan literally exists, for instance, have been really constant, within a few percentage points. I mean, incidentally, it's 68% of Americans believe that Satan literally exists. And 28% believe that evolution is a scientific theory backed up by evidence. I mean, the most tenuous possible accommodation to the last 50 years of molecular biology and the last 100 years, 150 years of biology. So,
while there are many excellent and profound arguments against religion, what specific practical practices can replace the portions of religious ritual that deal with human fears and anxiety about death, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question for which I don't have any kind of comprehensive answer. I mean, it's something that I'm thinking about. It's something that we have to make up out of our own honest conversation. It's really not the kind of thing that can be engineered in advance. I mean, people just have to start being honest with one another and see where that honesty takes them. When you're not sure of something, don't pretend to be sure. You know, and these nuances are preserved. Even fundamentalists are intellectually honest generally. I mean, no one is eager to go by the Brooklyn Bridge as a fundamentalist. I mean, they want evidence. They want an honest representation of the state of the world. It's just that we have dumbed down our conversation so much on the territory of religion that we are playing by a different standard. And so I think it's for us to find out what would take the place of superstition and taboo.